across the UK, across continental North America, and around the world on the internet by webcast and by podcast. My name is Howard Hughes, and this is The Unexplained. Now, if you want to...
That there was the legendary opening line to The Unexplained by the legendary Howard Hughes, the presenter for, I think, almost 20 years of that podcast and radio show. Unfortunately, we learned just last week that Howard died about 2 weeks ago after a short illness. The news was relayed to the world on his podcast by his webmaster Adam Cornell, and the tributes to such a wonderful and a great person have been flooding in, coming from fans and from ufologists, scientists and, well, other broadcasters alike, who just wanted to pay their tributes to somebody who they found was a very decent man, a very talented presenter and a great friend, basically. Philip Mantle of Flying Disc Press wrote, "Howard was a wonderful man, and I will forever be grateful for all of the support he gave me, especially my research into the Pascagoula case. My deepest condolences go out to all of Howard's family and friends. I'm sure you will all agree with me that he will be sorely missed." Author Jason Gleaves has written, "It is with a heavy heart that I share the news of the passing of Howard Hughes, the host of The Unexplained, the TV and the radio show. Howard was the first person to interview me when my book, UFO Photo, was published, and he always supported my work in ufology. He was not just a colleague, but also a good friend. You will be dearly missed, my friend and fellow Liverpudlian. Jason Gleaves, UFOnly." And this from Nick Pope. "Howard Hughes, creator of and host of The Unexplained, has died. He did an immense amount of work to highlight stories on UFOs and the paranormal, the unexplained and fringe science. His knowledge of, passion for and contribution to these topics was immense." Those are just a few of the many hundreds of thousands of tributes that have poured in for Howard Hughes of The Unexplained. Of course, there's loads of others that have come in from the other side of broadcasting. Howard Hughes, of course, was born in Liverpool, started work in Liverpool. His hobby when he was young was radio broadcasting, even just of a sort of amateur hobbyish sort of way, kind of like podcasters do now, like me. But he wanted to pursue that as a career, and he did, and he made broadcasting. He lived for the news. He worked on the BBC in different locations across the UK. Howard worked on LBC, worked on local different radio stations. He went everywhere, even Capital Radio. I think that was one of the biggest ones he worked with, and he went everywhere over the world. He was the newsman. He was the one who couldn't wait to get into the office, couldn't wait to start researching that day's news, keeping it up to date, and then presenting it in his own inimitable style. Of course, throughout Howard's life, he had this other thing, this other interest that he wanted to bring to the world. And he decided to do that with the new medium of podcasting, or I think it was called webcasting back in those days. And that interest was about the unexplained. It was about the paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, and that kind of thing. He wanted to talk about it. He had an interest in such things, and he wanted to talk about it, and why not? So he did, and in 2004, I believe it was, he created a show on radio, first of all, that went on to podcast in 2006, called The Unexplained with Howard Hughes. And it was just perfect. He had the nous. He had the ability to get the right guests on. He knew how to ask the right questions in the right way. He knew the questions that we all wanted to know the answer to. And that is why The Unexplained with Howard Hughes became so popular, and it became so much of a pull for loads of people. It's still in the podcast archives now. I think it will stay there for the rest of eternity. He did over 800 shows, 800 episodes. That is a lot of work, but he done it because he loved it. He done it because he wanted to live out his hobby, do his hobby, and bring his hobby and his interest to us. And it inspired a lot of people. It inspired me. 2017, I was working as a delivery driver for a big supermarket, and of course I wanted to find out more about the Rendlesham Forest incident. So I went on my podcasts on my phone. I'd never had any podcasts before, never listened to them. There it was, Howard Hughes. I think it was one of the early episodes with Colonel Charles Holt, who was involved in the Rendlesham Forest incident, and from the first word of that show, I was hooked. Again, the presentation style, the knowing what to say, when to say it, how to ask the guest, was just perfect. It was something to listen to. It was like listening to an artist, if that makes sense. Listening to a radio artist while they're making their art. It really was. And you could hear the interest in Howard's voice. It was something special. And of course it was something that inspired many of us to have our own podcast. I have my own podcast right here, UFOs and other paranormal stuff. Completely different type of podcast. But it was down to Howard who inspired me to do it. I remember back in the day when I was starting up, I'd send Howard Hughes just a couple of emails seeing if he could help out. You know, just you look back at them now and they're just almost like silly fan emails, if you like. But he took the time out to reply to me and to tell me what I might want to do, how I might want to do it, and just be yourself kind of thing. I think that was a measure of a man. He took his time out of his busy life to communicate with me, but to also communicate with you, the other fans. And receiving that email back felt absolutely wonderful. It felt like opening a present on Christmas Day, didn't it? It was something else, because we knew that we were important to Howard just as much as he was important to us. At no other time was that connection with Howard through the podcast, through the emails, through the radio, more important than when it came to 2020 and the COVID-19 lockdowns. We were all most of us stuck at home. I still had to go out to work. But the lockdowns affected everybody, one way or another. And Howard knew that he had a duty to his fans. And by God, didn't he live up to that duty? He started producing 2 podcast episodes a week, as well as the radio shows. And I think eventually the TV shows followed a year or 2 later, maybe still in lockdowns, I'm not sure. But he connected with us, he talked to us, he told us about his life, we wrote to him about our lives. It felt like it wasn't a presenter talking to us like on normal on the radio. It felt like we were having we all had a friendship with Howard Hughes. I think the most important thing that he provided during that time of hardship for a lot of people was escapism. The Unexplained with Howard Hughes was always a legendary show, but during that time it gave us all 2 hours a week, just 2 hours a week, where we could take our minds off of the COVID-19, off of the constant bad news. And blimey, that was something that I think that deserved an award in itself. And I really wish Howard would have been around to receive an award, because he deserved one. I would like to take this opportunity now to say thank you, Howard, for what you did for me, for us, as your community. It was massive. You will probably never know just how much you and your show were appreciated by, like I said, millions of people around the world. Thank you for what you did. It was a lot of hard work, and you put in a lot of effort and a lot of hard work, and, well, we all enjoyed it. And we learned a lot from it. So I want to say thank you very much. Rest in peace. I hope you now have the answers up there that you've been looking for. I hope you have a good time, though, first of all, meeting with your parents and family members again, as I'm sure you will have a lot of catching up to do. Just once again, Howard, for the memories, for the stuff you taught us, for the education, for the friendship. Thank you very much.
Across the UK, across continental North America, and around the world on the internet by webcast and by podcast, my name is Howard Hughes, and this is The Unexplained.